This is Leslie, Thinking Upwards. Welcome to the Walnut Women podcast. You know, right thinking about God leads to right living. Join our conversation as we discuss various topics through a biblical lens and a Christ-centered worldview. We hope the Word of God, through the power of the Holy Spirit, will help you live out gospel-transformed lives for the glory of God. In this episode, Alice, Meryl, and Vanessa join me as we talk about how God has given us money and finances to steward for His glory, and how faith in God's provision for our needs frees us to give generously to those in need. This is the Walnut Women podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining this episode today. As you know, our topic is going to be on finances. And again, this has been an area that has been impacted for each family or each individual by COVID based on whether or not you now have permanent or temporary job loss, or if you've been furloughed, or if you're, business owner, or just company to company. We're looking at, sales and numbers differently based on how COVID has impacted people's spendings and, luxuries and leisures and, vacationing and trips and stuff like that. And basically it's uprooted, ultimately the security that we have all placed in financial wealth and financial security, which has maybe for some of us become an idol. And, something that I've heard about a person's heart is if you want to know where a person's treasure is in their heart, just look at the way they spend their time and their money, and it'll show you what they truly treasure. Yeah. So today on this episode, we'll start with the question of how do we know if we've treasured money more importantly as an idol than our treasure that we know to be in Christ. So Alice, we'll just start with you.
Okay, well, that's actually a very good question. And just as Meryl said earlier, that in the past few episodes, we've been talking about idolatry. Everything that we talk about, all this issue that we're facing, if you think clearly, is all because of what's in our heart. As you said earlier, Leslie, that, what we treasure, in our heart, it shows in our action. So for me, I see that how do we know that if we made money an idol is when we actually basically what is idol? Idol is basically whatever we place above God. So especially during this COVID-19, I know that as Vanessa mentioned earlier, we know some individuals in our church, they have faced furlough, or some of them have lost their jobs. And even for those of us, including Ray and myself, we still have a job, but we sometimes wonder whether how long God is going to allow us to be in this job. And also sometimes I know that some people, so to me, I feel like when we make money an idol is when we actually start getting anxious about whether we can actually hold on to this job, or what's going to happen if we lose it, and is God going to provide another one for us? And also how are we going to, like you said earlier, how are we going to invest? How are we going to upkeep with our investment if we don't have a job? So I feel like when we start feeling anxious about our employment, when we start feeling anxious about what our future investment is going to hold, that's when we start really should check our heart and see if we really start idolizing money over God, or over any other relationship that we have. So that's how I see it. I don't know about you guys. What do you guys think about this question? It's a very good question. It's a hard issue there.
I think for me, it's similar. I think when I can tell when I'm idolizing money, when I get really stingy and very controlling about our money. Because I'm oh my gosh, what if I give to this, or what if I donate this and I don't have enough money later? And then I start all these fears and anxieties. I'm what if I don't have enough? And also even when I look to money as the source of contentment, when I feel I have enough and I feel so good, I feel so just good, and I feel secure. And I think that's when that kind of shows that it's kind of more God plus money, and not just trusting God to provide whether I have money or not, whether we have enough or not. So I think, yeah, when I easily get like discontent with like where we're at, like, anxious, like it really shows me like, okay, like maybe I'm putting too much, you know, like weight and like, like weight onto whether or not we have money or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like how you said like when you start feeling like it's God plus money. I think that's like a really good way of putting it. I think in our culture, because I don't know if it's because we're Asian, but I think when we think about money, we don't really think about the fact that like God is the one who is giving us this resource to steward. I think a lot of times when we think about money, it's just like, well, I earned it. Like I have to work harder. If I don't have a job, I need to find a job. Like it's very much in our control, you know, we feel like it. And so I think as a result, then that encourages that tendency to see things as God plus money. Like God is separate from our money. And I think that leads to not only idolizing it, but also just, it's also another form of idolatry, like not being able to give it up easily, you know? I think when we're young or when we don't have money, the idea is like we want to try and train our hearts to see that money is given to us to steward, and it should be given back to God first and foremost. But I think as we accumulate more money, somehow that sort of gets pushed to the side, and we just start thinking like, oh, I have all this money, like what should I do? Should I invest in like my retirement fund? Should I invest in my child's savings? Should I remodel my kitchen? You know, like all these other needs or wants start taking the place of that heart of, man, I'm supposed to give to God first and foremost.
Yeah, I'm going to bring this back to the Israelites and their time in the wilderness and how God gave them, allowed them to experience hunger. And then he fed them manna and they didn't know what it was. And then he told them, like, you shall not live by bread alone, but by the word of God, every word that comes forth from God. And that is to show ultimately that God is the one who sustains our lives. And I mean, as Americans, I would say we live more luxurious lives than we could imagine compared to the rest of the world. So unless we're really in a place where we're experiencing things like starvation, everything that has been given to us is pretty excessive. Like we have abundance here, and our church is an abundant church. I think God has really blessed us. And I think when we just think about if our basic needs are met and we trust in the Lord as our daily provider, as he asked us to by faith, we can feel free to use the excess money, the money that we could put into savings or we could invest it in, like, to see that number go up. But do we have the faith to invest it for the kingdom of God? That's just what I've been thinking about, like, in this time. I think when we've heard some announcements of how, you know, people have given over to the Compassion Fund, you know, because there's this time of need, and, you know, the numbers, I mean, people are still giving. And I think I'm just really encouraged by that, you know, our church, every time we say there's need, people give. And I think that is a spiritual blessing that shows that we give because we're thankful for what we have been given, like our basic needs, and we give because we have an abundance and we want to steward it for, you know, gospel, for gospel-centered things, not like self-centered things. Yeah, do you guys have any other thoughts about this?
Like in preparing for this podcast, I was reading the Bible and I was thinking, man, I don't know a lot of verses that talk about money. I think we should teach more about money. But I did, Hallie told me to read 1 Timothy 6.
Yeah.
And I was reading it and I was like, wow, this is so clear as to what we're supposed to do with our money. And it's saying like, it straight up just says like, if you're rich, like use your money to do good, you know, like, and I was like, man, that's like an awesome way to put it, because I think even though we might not think of ourselves as rich, you know, we are very rich, like you were saying, Leslie, and we do have an overabundance of resources. And we're supposed to use those resources to do good, however that looks like.
I was actually reading First Timothy 2 while preparing for this, and I actually wrote it down. But it says, like, I think in verse 10, it says, like, for the love of the money is a root of all kinds of evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. And I think it's interesting that it said, like, some have wandered away from the faith. And I think it just kind of shows that, like, there's a lack of faith in God to like provide. I think that's kind of like what it comes down to, like kind of what we were saying earlier, like we're just not trusting that God will bring us that like full contentment, whether we have money or not. And so that's just really
I think finances and money definitely pull at the heart and really magnifies whether we are content with what God has given to us. Also, our contentment in the Lord and what Christ has already done, and the eternal wealth that He has given us access to, and how the love of money really can be a hindrance for someone entering the kingdom of God. Just as I think one of the parables, I think in Mark 10, there's a couple of those parables that talks about that rich young ruler and how he wasn't willing to sell everything for the Lord. I mean, if God asked you to abandon it for His name's sake, like, are you gonna say, yeah, are you tied to it? Can you obey and follow the Lord instead? So I think like money is really closely tied into our hearts. As you guys know, like, I mean, just as an application, like when you first get married and you see how your spouse spends, like sometimes there's conflict. Like money can create such conflict because it's really tugging at what you value versus what your spouse values, and are you guys okay with that? You know, and it highlights like where we cannot let go of certain values. So I think marriage has actually been a really good tool for God to use to sanctify and kind of give us like a checkpoint of like, are we really fueling values or treasures that are earthly or heavenly? I also wanted to share like a personal example of when I was in college, and I had a mentor who was actually a seminary student from another country, and she loved on me by spending on me. Like she would buy me snacks, she would buy me little gifts, anything that made her think about me, she just kind of gave. Like she was really, I think, gifted to give. And I remember when she gave, I thought, this woman must be really rich because she spent on me like nobody else has spent on me. And I remember thinking that thought, she must be rich. And later on, I found out she was actually living off of people's sponsorship. Like she was given money so that she can just have the basics, and she was living very minimally. And when I found that out about her, the lesson that it taught me was that her heart trusted in the Lord, and she wasn't tied to this money. And it really was like a tangible example of someone whose faith in the Lord, but like magnified and overshadowed like her desire to find security in the finances. And it was just, it changed my perspective on how I should steward my money one day, like when I was going to have my own job. And I think like it's really beautiful when we see people who give because they have faith in the Lord. And, you know, giving is actually a spiritual gift. It's one of the gifts listed, which I think is really interesting, that there are those that God just enables them to give for the good of the church and for the edification of the church. So I think that's really neat.
That's really sweet, because that really reminds me of how, like Leslie, you shared about this mentor you had in college, and just remind me how we must recount our blessings. You know, I think many times, how do we grow our trust in the Lord? Because we look back and see how God has been faithful to us. And that happens to our family, to my family several times, you know, and God just always provided perfect timing. And whenever I feel like short of whether it's money or, you know, and I always remind myself, you know, the Lord has carried us through those difficult times at that moment. And He's going to do it again, you know, because I remember what He's done for me and my family, and He's going to do it again. So I think that when we recount those blessings, we will definitely remember that our God is faithful, and He is able. He's able. We have to trust Him, with our experience, and then to be able to move forward. I'm sure that your mentor in college, I'm sure she has received many blessings before, and so she was able to really pour herself out onto you, and and now you're doing the same thing for many of us, that we're all sitting here being the beneficiary.
We have been blessed.
Yeah, we're being blessed, exactly. We're being blessed by you, and it's just like we are again, so we can bless others. We receive the blessing from God. Yeah.
So I'll close with the final question, which is during this time of COVID, and we're still kind of in lockdown mode in our households, and we're still kind of taking things lightly as we make our appearance back into on the church campus. So how are we to think practically in application of how to steward the finances that God has entrusted to us? Like what can we be doing, or what are the things that we can continue to do that we've done in the past?
I think when we don't go to church, initially for me, like it's hard to give offering because you just feel like, well, I'm at home, it's hard to remember to give offering because you don't have that weekly habit of going to like a physical church. So I think just exercising that discipline. I personally don't like doing the auto pay thing just because I feel like I don't feel like I can prepare my heart for it. Like I like to pray over it and really prepare my heart for it. So I think just being more intentional that even though we're not going to church every week physically for some of us yet, just setting aside that time and that priority in our life to give offering. And I think during this time, I can see like how a lot of missionaries would be really struggling during this time, wherever they may be at because of COVID and the different things that have been put on lockdown. So I think just praying how we could support them, not only through prayer, but also just with the resources that God has given us.
Yeah, very true. And go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was thinking missionaries too, because I think it's easy to like forget about our missionaries, especially like if they're overseas. I feel like right now, like a lot of them are like back home and like they can't go back to the field for like COVID reasons, and so they might need like the extra support, or even just like prayer too, or like going out to like spend time with them or something. But I think also like I'm actually just thinking right now, I feel like it's also important just to like connect with people right now to actually know like what their needs are. And like, if you like talk to them, like, they actually have financial need, then like maybe you can like, if it's like appropriate, if they want to, like, then you can like step in to like, like help them financially, or, if it's like the hospitals, like, like donating like masks, or like, which our church has them, which is like so awesome. Or just like donating like money or other supplies. I think like there's a lot of ways that we can help. And even if it's like, even if you're not making like money right now, I feel like even like, like making a like, or cooking a meal for someone, or like making like, like, oh hey, like I'm thinking about you, like some kind of like gift basket, or something like that, something creative like that. I feel like that time is also kind of like our money, like our resources too. And I feel like there's a lot of ways that we can like really steward like our money, our time, our resources for God in this time.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth, Vanessa, because that's exactly what I was going to say. Just again, like you're saying, just being intentional and realistic, and then how we can really care for the needs of the community. God has given us this family to care for. And again, like I said earlier, that because we are binded together because of Christ, so we can take care of each other's needs. And like you're saying, cook a simple meal for someone and who are in need and who is in need, or even like, just bring something over to share with them. And then during the time when I'm preparing meals for others, it's time also for me to pray for them too, and when I get grocery, I will get extra portion just so I can cook for that family. And in the process, I get to pray for them. I get to prepare my heart to minister to them. And that's such a blessing that I think that pleases God, not just that we are able to spend the money He's blessed us with, but we also will spend the time and spend the effort, spend the heart, like invest our heart in caring for these people. And then, yeah, that just brings me joy. You know, I just feel like that's exactly what God wants us to do, you know, helping that giving spirit, to be his feet and hands and feet to help others, to care for others.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think giving doesn't have to necessarily be financial giving. There's also like the giving to fulfill like a physical need. I think some people prefer to make a meal versus like pay for like a takeout order. And, you know, like I have really witnessed in something as practical, like our church does food tidings for families of, you know, special circumstances or new moms or families with newborns. And I've seen the pattern of how food tidings work. And I would say, especially in this season where everyone is, you know, stuck in their homes, no one's going out traveling, I've seen those food tidings lists fill up like really quickly. And, you know, what I take of that is just the blessing that people are ready to give and serve when there's a need, and they're giving out of the abundance, out of the joy of serving the body, even if they're signing up for someone that they don't personally know. And I think all of these things are just blessings of seeing the church come together and just meeting one another's needs. Like we're a community, and I mean, for the ones who have need, we just need to connect them to those with the resources. And I think this time has really given people just more time to serve each other. And it's been a very beautiful picture of the body of Christ. It's just a very tangible picture of that. I also want to go back to the foundation of tithing. I think this is a good time to talk about it because we don't really get to talk about this much. But can I just ask you guys to clarify, like, what is a tithe? What does it mean to tithe as a Christian? Sorry, I'm throwing in a curveball here.
I think tithing is like an Old Testament concept where you give like a tenth of what you have profited to God. And I think in the New Testament, it doesn't really talk about tithing because I think God just wants us to give as much as we can, like not just 10%, but Hallie always likes to say, like, he wants you to give more than 10%, you know? And honestly, God doesn't really care about like how much money you're giving him. Like ultimately it boils down to like what we were talking about in the beginning, that it's so easy to find security in money and to have money be an idol. But when we give it to God, then that's like training ourselves to not hold it as an idol, you know. Even if it is an idol, when we give it over, then it helps us to relinquish it as an idol and to remember, hey, like God is the one who gave this to me. And if I have a need, like he's going to provide for it. And he has already provided so abundantly. And that's why I can have this privilege of giving to the church or giving to someone else who might need it more, you know.
You know, like on that, I think if you became a Christian after you started your first job and then you're like, what, I have to give 10% over to the church. I think it's such a foreign concept. Like it feels like a lot of money you're losing because I think if you don't have this foundation of like what money is used for, what God wants us to think of money, I think it feels like a lot. And I think a journey of giving and trusting God is a lifelong journey. But I also want to reiterate that our offering, you know, it could be 10%, but I think if we give more than that, it really shows our willingness to love God and to trust him if he's already provided like for our basic needs. So yeah, I think I'm very encouraged that there are people in our church who love to give and love to help and by filling needs. And so do you guys have any other comments or thoughts on this topic? All right, well, I'm just going to close and say that whether we're in a season of financial prosperity or financial need, the
Mm.
question we can always ask ourselves is what Jesus Christ,
Right.
what he's done for us, is that enough for us? And does that bring us true contentment
Mhm.
versus having our physical wants and desires fulfilled? And I think this is ultimately a question of contentment in the Lord. And if we are content in Christ,
Yes.
we will be content in times of need, and we will trust that God will provide just as he said that he would. So we can just close our time, and thanks for sharing all those wonderful thoughts on this topic, and we'll see you next time.
Is money and financial security an idol in your life? My prayer is that faith in God's goodness to provide for your needs will free your heart to lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. Join us next time on the Walnut Women podcast. Thanks for listening.